There we go.
All right. Thank you so much for playing, Neil. This is Brian Parham with the Rock Dojo. Get a black belt in rock, and I'm so excited because I'm here with Neil Larocque, who this is actually part 2. We met, gosh, about I don't know 6 months ago or so for a Zoom meeting, and
We
that was
did.
an absolute blast. And we talked about learning how to play the guitar, yeah, as kids, and how the guitar influenced your career. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today.
Thank you, man. I had a blast last time, so this is it's always a pleasure, and I'm always keeping tabs on Rock Dojo, watching your success, so it makes me happy too.
Thank you so much. Speaking about success, oh my God. So we've had some updates since last time. Number one, you released a new album, Off the Sauce, with Hex Bag Hustlers.
Yeah.
That had, last time we communicated via Facebook, you had 97 million streams in China in the first week, man. Like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
It was on one particular song, that the song that I was playing when we started, called New Shanghai Funk. And I have to believe, because not all the songs on the album got that many streams, it's just because Shanghai was in the title. So if I was smart about the album, I would have called everything something in a city in China something else, right? But yeah, it was surprising when I opened NetEase Music, because I subscribed to that. I just moved to Philadelphia to do a master's at UPenn, so my wife and kid are still back in China. But I have NetEase Music, and it was really cool to see the album cover and everything. And on their like main platform, they were advertising it very well. And it's funny to open up an app and see your album and be like, wow, I downloaded my own album.
That's incredible. First of all, I think you're not giving yourself enough credit because I've been listening to Off the Sauce, and it's incredible, man. It's
Thank
really
you.
incredible. And I have to be honest, I'm typically I haven't listened to funk music. I'm not a huge funk fan, but I love your album. I love your guitar playing, man. You
Thank you.
mentioned New Shanghai Funk, man. As soon as that first guitar solo comes in, and I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions, but I really had the feeling like here's a guitar player with his own signature voice.
Oh,
And
thank you so much.
I really love, I don't know if this is the correct term, so I haven't studied this style of playing very much, but like outside in playing, I don't know. And part of the geeky part of me, I don't want to like get off on, but the geeky part of me wants to know, like, is that like pentatonic superimposition that you learned from or
Yes.
a little bit different approach?
No, you pretty much nailed it, right? Like there's also some Dorian in there, but basically it's wherever the chords are going. I'm still playing pentatonic. A better example of that would probably be the first track on the album, called Salem Road. So a lot of times people say, well, the second half of that solo kind of sounds like you're not playing pentatonic, but I am. I'm just moving with the chords. So it's pentatonic uh, as the chord shifts from seventh chords.
So there you go, kids. Next time I tell you to play your pentatonics, you got it from like a pentatonic master here, and you should listen to these tracks because it sounds incredibly sophisticated. It's incredible, and they, for me as a trained guitarist, just instantly jump off the off the speakers, and it's just something unique, and the way that you flow from one to the next, and not just your guitar playing, but just want to give you some love here in this album because
Yeah, hey,
man,
go
the
for it. I'm not
songs,
going to say no.
yeah, the songs. I mean, there's some incredible songs on there that really hit me. Your guitar playing is just masterful, man. I mean,
Thank you.
I had no idea the level that you were at. And songs like "Holding On to Wrong," "Angels." I was just listening to the Razor's Edge. That's another one of those that has just a killer guitar solo, man.
Yeah, that one that was an interesting one, because there's three songs that I wrote toward the end of the album, whereas some songs like Salem Road and Angel were written 20 years ago, literally, right? So they sounded a little bit different, obviously, but the framework and everything was there. And I think you can tell that from the song structure and the chordal playing, that they're very simple in their approach to the songs. But they're very, we've updated them, or I updated them as we kind of progressed. And I thank you for the compliments on the guitar playing, but I think the reason the guitar playing, it sounds more complicated than it really is, because I have some amazing musicians, and there's just killer piano fills and saxophone fills all over the album, and not to mention the piano in the back, or the keys in the background, and just the musicians on this album make me sound better, I think, and make the songs sound a lot more full and a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, you know what? I feel you, but I just want to let you know, dude, you're at that level. I mean, and you
Thank
belong
you.
with those guys. And you're right, man. The musicianship there was a piano solo that I heard the other day, or organ, or I mean, just absolutely incredible. So congratulations. And I do have some questions prepared for you, but before I jump into those questions, I just want to ask you, how many streams are you at now, dude, total? If you had 97 million the first week.
Yeah, not that much more. Probably 100 million, just over 100 million now.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
I mean, it's 2 million more, really. And I think
That's
most of them were from my wife.
all right. I'm going to dive into the prepared questions. So, for those people who are unfamiliar with your music, can you give us a mile high overview of your musical career?
Oh, okay, I can try. Um, my mute also, I got a guitar. I think I explained this maybe the last time we had an interview, but I got a guitar when I had asked for a guitar for Christmas, and my brother got one. And I wanted to learn this 3-chord song that my friends were in a band called Donkey Head. And I just wanted to learn to play this 3-chord power chord song. And didn't take me very long, but once I learned it, I was hooked, right? And I just played every day in my bedroom. I was 17 years old when I started playing guitar. And then when I went away to university the first time, from the article that you read that you were talking about, I played in my first band, and we weren't very good. We were, first band, you're kind of feeling things out. But I think probably after I graduated, I started playing on the blues scene in Toronto. And that's where I sort of got a lot of live experience, and I played with some really, really strong musicians from that scene. In particular, a guy named Brant Parker, who is an incredible blues guitar player and an incredible blues vocalist. So I got some experience playing with pros, and I got experience playing in that market, right? Then I moved to Japan, just dropped everything and moved to Japan. And I started to play with people from all over the world. So that also expanded things a little bit more for me, to be playing with different sort of flavors of music. Still blues, I was still very much in the blues vein. Released a couple of my own albums in Japan that no one bought. Like you could go to the record store and see it, but no one was buying it. I couldn't even give them away. So that's how it goes. They weren't really bad songs, to be honest. I thought they were quite good, but it just didn't fit. Nobody in Japan was interested in what I was writing. And then flash forward, this is probably where it's more important. When I moved to China, I quit playing guitar altogether. So I sold all my guitar equipment, like everything. I went to China, Beijing, China, with a couple of suitcases and a small Boss digital studio, right? And my first day at work, some guy comes running up to me and from England, he's like, "Hey, you're the guy that plays guitar. We got to play in a band together." And I'm just like, I quit music. I don't want to do it anymore. For various reasons. It felt like a long time with no payoff. And so I didn't even want to touch a guitar. It reminded me of just bad things. But then within a month, he had me playing bass, right? And so that band went on to win Best Band in Beijing 2 years running. I was playing bass with a band called the Groove Collective. We wrote all of our own original material, never really recorded any of it, but we played, I think, 300 and some odd shows over 2 years. And then I left the band. I had met my wife at that point, and we started our own schools in China, and the guitar went away again. And then at some point, I just wasn't fulfilled enough in my job. Like you can quit the guitar, but the guitar never quits you type of idea. So I went back to playing and just for myself. And that's why I started taking the degree at Berklee, because it gave me sort of a way to continue to play guitar, or almost like an excuse where, you know, I could say to my wife, well, I got this degree I got to do. Right. You know, so I would, you know, play guitar that way. But then my friend who's he had lived in Beijing, and he actually is a Berklee graduate as well. He's a drummer. He comes to visit me and he's like, I'm going to stay for a month. And I'm like, no problem. And he starts getting introduced to all the guys in the Shenzhen music scene where I'm living. And then soon enough, I'm jamming with people and I'm meeting everybody in the music scene. And then there was a guy that came from, well, he's originally from the United States, named Derek Big Walker, who played with Mike Bloomfield, Big Mama Thornton, all these other like huge blues influences of mine when I was growing up. And he plays saxophone, harmonica, and singer. So he's kind of a solo artist. He's living in Sweden at this point. And I get a call from an agent saying, hey, they need a blues guitar player. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, no, because everything about that scared me. Like I was so nervous to hear these names, and I know him from playing with those bands. Like I know this guy, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Fine, I'll do it. And we opened a club. We were like the house band for this club that I did a month-long opening of this club in Shenzhen, and I played with him every single day for a month. And you know, that's how I kind of like really made a name for myself there. That's how all the musicians who are on the album now know me, is from playing with this legend, this blues legend. So they started to kind of get interested in what I was writing. And I post a lot on WeChat, which is kind of like the equivalent of Facebook in China. So they get to see, you know, a lot of my guitar playing and things I would write, I would post. And we just started communicating back and forth. And I'd go and see these guys because they're phenomenal. Like all of them are phenomenal. So I'd be out in Shenzhen and I'd go to a particular club where I know the bass player is going to be, or I know the piano player. Usually the piano player and the saxophone player were always playing together. So I could go and see them. Yeah, so that's basically my music career. There's other things, like I've done musicals and rock musicals. I was in Hedwig and the Angry Inch at the Edmonton Fringe Festival. Again, it was a situation where someone sort of dropped out and I got to fill in, right? I had a week to learn all of 11 songs. And I did my best. It sold out every single night. So that was, yeah, it was voted best show at the Fringe Festival that year, which I think was 2011, maybe. It was a while ago, but yeah. So, and I've done jingles and written for TV and things like that, little things here and there, but I've never really always focused on music, and I still don't. Like music is something I do while I'm doing something else.
You know, as I was going through and researching you and reading some of the articles about you, I think was the biggest thing that hit me, because that's who I am as well. It may be from coming into the guitar late. You came into the guitar at the age of 17. I came into the guitar at probably the age of 27, 28. My memory gets a little bit fuzzy. But by this point, you know, we already have so many different interests. And I think that, you know, sometimes like technically I wish like, oh God, it would be so much better if I started when I was 6. But then in terms of, and this is the next question I want to ask you, but in terms of like your voice as an artist, which isn't exactly always the same as your voice as a technical guitar player. And
right.
So this is what I wanted to ask you is, how did you find your voice on the guitar? I think you kind of explained it though, through playing with all these, you know, playing with these musicians, but is there anything else that you would like to add? Like how you found your signature voice, not like the blues guitar player or the funk guitar player, you know, at a professional level, but how did you become Neil Larocque on the guitar?
Most definitely 100% of that credit goes to my Berklee guitar instructor, Scott Terulli. Most definitely, because I chose him specifically. He's a little more fusion and jazz in his writing, but he can play anything. But I spent, you know, all 9 semesters with him, and I chose him very specifically because of his playing style, because of his solo phrasing. Um, and that's pretty much all we worked on. Like, you have your proficiency things that you have to do, of course, but he always found a way to make those proficiency elements relevant to my guitar playing, and how to incorporate those elements into my soloing style. Because I mean, chords are actually much harder than soloing. To be able to play chords that are interesting and unique and different, or different voicings. But I've been playing chords for years and years and years. So it wasn't a situation where we focused on chords, because I was pretty clear in my writing style. I know that I really dig funk and funk-like sounds. However, you do hear a little bit of, it's not pure funk. Like, not even the pure funk songs are not pure funk. New Shanghai Funk goes into a disco breakdown that is very jazzy. Other parts have what I will call jazz chords, for lack of a better word. That it doesn't take you to a jazz place, but it sounds jazzy, if you know what I'm saying, right? So a lot of those elements also came from working with Scott Cerulli on how to sort of build progressions that don't seem static the entire time, unless that's what you're going to. Like, for me, even pure funk, it changes even if you're playing the same chord and the same progression. The way those guys make it sound interesting is a lot of times in inflections, or the slight changes that they're doing on the chord tonalities, right? I love that, but I also want to take my songs in a little bit more of a different direction. Or something that, like, Pegged You, for example, is something that doesn't at all start out funk, but has this massive funk breakdown, right? Those are the type of things that Scott really taught me how to do. But more specifically, it's the soloing where we worked a lot on, and he gave me pieces to work on that sort of. I'm also really into the Allman Brothers. Like, they're probably my favorite band. They're not a funk band, but the way they play is melodic and really builds. And you probably can't tell from the album that I'm a huge Allman Brothers fan. But I think the influence in some of the things is there. The way they build songs and the way they change chords slightly, or rhythm slightly, I try to incorporate in my playing. So, yeah, Scott would, for example, say, well, why don't you play this solo, especially with the soloing? Like, Dickie Betts is probably one of my favorite guitar players. So, right. Yeah. And Robin Ford. And I was lucky to do like 2 video lessons with Robin Ford during the COVID. So I would say, like, I'd love to give credit and say, like, he really helped me, but I mean, it was 2 video lessons. Not even like on Zoom. Like, I sent him a video, he sent a video back. But it was incredible to hear Robin Ford be like, Neil, good to meet you through this video, and clearly you can play. And I'm like, Robin Ford just said I can play. Oh my! I'm running around, a hotel room in Hong Kong like a 5-year-old boy who just got a huge bag of candy. But yeah, which is funny because Scott Cerulli tours or had played many shows with Robin Ford, and Scott is just, first of all, an amazing human being. And secondly, one of the most underrated guitar players I've ever seen, but incredible, just mind-blowingly incredible with the way he plays and phrases things. So that's a long answer to get to that question, but that's what it is.
It was a great answer, and I have to say I'm a huge Allman Brothers fan, and so yeah, Dickie Betts to me is an absolute guitar god and legend.
Yes.
And the other thing that you mentioned was the video lessons. I've never done video lessons with Robin Ford, but I have done video lessons with Paul Gilbert, and I know the feeling. You're like, yeah. He's saying my name. Yeah. So, and you feel like a kid, like you said, got a 5-pound bag of candy just running around. So, feel you. So, how did you get started? Well, how did you get started writing music? And also the other thing is, do you sing? Because this is something like I didn't understand before I started writing music. Like I can sing, but nobody ever wants to hear me sing because it's terrible. However, I write lyrics and I write music, and I know I assume it's not you singing from what you told me on.
It is not me.
Yeah. So do you
But
sing?
yes, I
Do
did
you
write the lyrics and the vocal melodies.
Okay,
Um,
so you must be a proficient singer then, or
I'm a horrible singer. What I can do is I can sing kind of in key with the ideas presented enough that a vocalist can do it, right? And that's what I did. I'll go back to tell you how I started writing after I answered this question because we're on that now. But basically, what I would do is I've always written vocal melodies and not by choice. It's predominantly because every vocalist I've ever worked for has just been like, well, it's your music, so you write the lyrics, go ahead. Which is not 100% the way I want to do it because I am not a vocalist. Clearly, when you hear me sing, you'll be no, yeah, you should not be singing, right? It's just that thing. But I've had enough ear training and I've listened to enough music that hopefully my vocals are playing off the music rather than accompanying what I'm doing on the guitar. And I feel like that's the case because I can't play and sing at the same time. So that's probably what's happening. Or at least that's what I thought initially, and it turns out to be the case. So then how do I sit down and write lyrics is I'll like some people write from the lyrics first and then write the music is not something I'm comfortable doing. I write music, right? And then I'll sit down and really listen to, well, what's going on here and how can I play off of the music that we have rather than just following along with one of the instruments. I want the vocals to be its own instrument. So yeah, I'll sit down and then once I've got everything written and I feel like the rhythm is there, I'll just sort of record it. And then I send a copy to the vocalist and he makes it much, much better.
I just want to jump in there because that's one of my big things as an educator is I believe that, learning to play the guitar is not just a technical activity. It's about self-expression at the end of the day. And I really try to inspire my students because I don't sing well at all, like you were saying for yourself. But I sing good enough that I can capture an idea. And so what I like to show them is like, okay, check that. I'll be in the lesson, write a lyric, I'll record myself. Sounds terrible, but the idea is there and the guitar is there. And I'm like, watch this. I'm gonna send this to an actual singer and and then when it comes back with a professional vocalist, everything else being the same, just replace that vocal line. So what I'm trying to say is if you play guitar and you don't sing, there is hope. You can still be an artist. That you can do more than just play the guitar in a band. And
or just a lot of the times I'll write the vocal line on the guitar, like so I can, so there's that option too. You don't even need a vocalist if you want to go like a Steve Vai or Joe Satriani or all of those guys, that route too. Like just become incredibly proficient on the guitar, spend 20 hours a day so you can play something like For the Love of God, or Satch Boogie, whatever.
So I think you described your process for writing music. Did you say how you got started though? Like what was the
that was just something that felt so natural to me. I don't even remember. I can remember the first couple of songs I wrote because they were very, very basic. Of course, they would have to be. I hadn't been playing for guitar for very long, and I even remember the names, and they were brutal. So I'm not going to say them. Naming and writing lyrics is also something that kind of takes a lot of time. And I mean, writing music and writing lyrics helps me. My background in literature and everything really helps me with that. But it would seem like the most natural process to be for me. That's what I don't know if I consider myself a guitar player, but I more of a songwriter where I just use the guitar that I'm most proficient at, right? Because I can play bass and I can play guitar and I can play some keyboards. I'm just most proficient at the guitar and I have the most experience on it. So that's where my foundation comes in, right? But when I first started playing the guitar, I just wanted to create stuff. It seemed to me like, okay, I could play other people's music But I mean, we talked about this last time in the last interview too. I have a real hard time playing things note for note. I mean, I get kind of bored even when I'm looking at somebody. You have to do it, like for Allman Brothers especially. Like you can't really go off chart and start doing your own thing, and then it just doesn't sound like. Then it just sounds like blues, right? Like almost like improv blues. So there is a discipline to be able to learn someone else's song, but it's not as rewarding for me. And I think once I started to kind of figure out I can take chords and create and craft music that doesn't sound like anybody else. It may not be good at this point, but it doesn't sound like anybody else. That was my, okay, I can do this. And then once I really started playing with other people and I showed them stuff that I was confident with, and to get feedback like, wow, that's cool, you wrote that, that reaction, you just sort of get pumped from that. Like, it's the same thing because when I say to people like, yeah, I just released an album, they're like, oh, good, it probably sounds like crap. Like there's no credit given for you being a good musician, and then you play for them and they're just, whoa, you wrote that. Trying to be humble, but yeah, I wrote that. Like I'll listen to my own album as much as I listen to someone else's, because I wrote the music that I really like. Right. So, I'm not going to write it and throw it in a can, never listen to it. I dig my own music. That's why I play it. Right.
Yes, that's one of the best feelings in the world. It's I'm just being a creative and just being like, yeah, I made that. You made that? Yeah, dude. I love that feeling, man. I have to say there was this, I'm going off topic a little bit, but you mentioned our last interview and I felt kind of bad afterwards because I was like, you know what? I never learned, because we were talking about learning stuff note for note. I never learned stuff note for note. Yeah. And do you know I spent the last 6 months, I was like, I should start learning note for note. So I spent the last 6 months learning solos note for note. And I just thought about this, maybe because we were meeting. I just thought about this yesterday. And I was like, you know what? I think I actually just made more progress studying scales in theory than I ever did learning note for note. I thought like I was missing something. And I'm like, I'm going to go back and do this. But what I realized is like, I don't know. I feel like when you study, like when you're learning stuff note for note, maybe it's just me being a little bit lazy, but there's like the intellectual side gets cut off and it becomes more of like a physical thing. And I'm not connecting it to the theory. But when you're learning the scales and that stuff, I feel like you're thinking about the theory, but also it's just the notes available and the patterns. And so you have to be creative with it. And I feel like it's a faster way to find your voice. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's a faster way to find your voice because you actually have to turn that stuff into licks. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. And I think it all depends on the person, because I know some people who love to learn solos note for note and they'll blow you away with it. And it actually makes me feel bad. I'm just like, oh man, I can't. And then I'm like, oh, but can you write your own solo? Right. Because that's what's important to me. Again, I don't knock anybody's guitar playing or anybody's music choices. It's just that's not important for me to learn how to play like Dickie Betts. I love to listen to him, and I do love to sort of cop his licks here and there. But it's not important for me to sound like somebody else. It's important for me to sound like me.
I totally understand. Okay, so last couple questions. Aside from being a successful musician, you've also had a lot of success in academics. Can you tell us about your academic achievements and how music has helped you with your studies?
I think you can call them academic achievements if you like. That's very praiseworthy. Thank you. I've just gone to a lot of schools and I've invested in a lot of education. I didn't even want to go to university, but my dad said to me when I was 18 and graduating, if you go to university, I'll pay for it. I said, okay, well, that's sort of a win. So I went to the University of, it was then called the University of Western Ontario. Subsequently, it's just known as Western. Did not perform very well. You would not say that guy's going to Harvard. There's absolutely no way, right? I'm going to kind of like jump really quickly because I graduated, I did a bunch of work, and then I moved to Japan, and then I moved to China. And when I was in China, like I said, I got rid of the guitars. My sole purpose was to move to China to focus on how to improve myself as a teacher, specifically with ESL, as an ESL teacher. I have a literature background. My first degree was in literature. I love to read. I love to write. And then once my wife and I started making our companies, and I started teaching at that level, I was teaching literature, right? And it's once I became a literature teacher that my passion as a student sort of got ignited, because I always felt limited. I always felt like I'm missing something, or I'm missing either it was books to recommend, or I'm missing some sort of technique to teach my students, which is why I started going back to school. I got a CELTA before I started working, which is it's an ESL degree from the University of Cambridge. It's equivalent to, I guess, a 1-year degree for teaching, but it's teaching ESL, English as a second language. But once I started teaching literature, that was where I wanted to be. I wanted to be teaching that because my heart was just in it. So that's when I started taking a couple of courses at Harvard Extension School, which allowed me to apply and get accepted. And I started doing my master's work at Harvard, and most of it was done online. I had to be on campus, I think, for a month or something like that. But most of that work was done online, right? From there, I started taking tons of different online courses at Oxford and Cambridge, and all in literature, all to do with that. Then I decided, I want to get the Berklee degree. So I did that all online as well. I was fortunate, right? And this, I got accepted to this university in England, and I was going to do that online as well. But at the last minute, UPenn sent me an email by accident welcoming me to their program. Right? They said, welcome to you've been accepted, like on the assumption that I had already been accepted before. This is your welcome package. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't get an offer letter yet. And so I wrote them saying, yeah, I applied. I just haven't really finished the application. It was late by a lot, right? I just kind of forgot about it. And they wrote back and said, well, just finish the application, right? So, yeah, so I took that as, okay, that's, I'm going to get accepted, which not necessarily the case, but I did send it back, and then I eventually got accepted to UPenn for this Master's of Science in Education in Reading, Writing, and Literature. So I don't know if those are accomplishments. I think it's just, I am by far the oldest student in the class, by a lot, and I'm in some cases as old or older than the professors who teach me. So it's if you're willing to put up with some ageism, I guess it's a good call.
I'm dying laughing here because I understand. I do a lot of classes online. I recently, those things start to get pretty pricey. I'm somebody, by the way, who believes, in just like you, career and just continuing education to improve. And I think every time that you pick up a new skill or a new path, it opens a new door. I mean, it opens an entirely new door. And that's one thing that really hit me as I was reading through some of the articles about you, is that you studied literature. That's something that I'm very much into as well. In fact, I'm writing a musical right now, a rock opera / musical. And I often think how much I'm influenced. I think my influences personally extend well beyond music, and a lot of it is actually cartoons that I used to enjoy as a kid, or books that I loved, And so I found that to be really interesting. I want to know what are your plans after UPenn?
It's a good question. Ideally, I'd like to move to Boston, just because most of my connections are there from the other schools. I'm surprisingly really enjoying Philly. I didn't think I would like it as much as I do. But I also think it's it's different. It's a little dangerous at the moment, right? After the pandemic, it's not quite as safe as I've experienced a couple things, but nothing overtly dangerous, but just, some run-ins, just walking to and from school. But Boston, I love that city. I just, I used to go there because my job also took me pretty much to, at least 50% of the United States every year. All of the East Coast states, definitely. So I've spent a lot of time in various states in Boston, and I spent a lot of time in Boston. I also did a lot of courses at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, right? Both going to the campus and online. So it's just that area is Boston and Cambridge is really, I love it there, So hopefully I'll end up at an international school there. Will I do music? And the other thing is, like, how do I connect all my education to music? And you sort of covered that. Does music influence things? I'm sure it does. It's not something I really cognitively process. But when I was doing my introductions at UPenn, because the first week of class, that's what you're doing. Hi, my name is I'm from this and I said my degrees, and it feels almost arrogant to say these things, but I have a degree in this, I have this degree, I have this degree, and then I kind of put Berklee last. And and people always immediately gravitate towards Harvard, even the people at UPenn, which is like, you went to Harvard? I'm like, you're at UPenn. This is the #1 ranked graduate school of education in the country. Right? Like, but you went to Harvard? I got a degree from Harvard. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? It's so funny to see how people freak out at that name while you're at another Ivy League school, right? Berklee was by far my most educational degree. That sounds weird to say, but I learned way more as a person about myself from doing that degree than I have from anything else.
Wow, I'm sorry to cut in, but you just have to explain that, because I find it fascinating when you're talking about Harvard, UPenn, some of the other places that you went to. How was going to Berklee and studying music so pun, instrumental in your education? Yeah, sorry.
I think because it's only you focusing on you. It's you sitting down with like your skills, and you may be playing somebody else's stuff, and actually Berklee's really good about allowing you to have a creative voice most of the time. So even in courses where you do play other people's music, another assignment in the same week will be, well, like, you do your own thing on this, right? So I think it's challenging you in ways to be creative by yourself. Whereas all my other degrees are read this, tell me what it's about. You can analyze it and, give your own perspective on things, but it's more about their theories and their work than it is about my own impression, right? How do you understand this work? There's not like, how do you understand this work and then output it in your own way, right? Or do something creative with it. It's not to say that you can't be. I mean, I feel like a lot of my answers, even in the education courses that I take, are creative and sort of outside the box, but it's not the same thing where I have to really tap into something within myself to be creative and pull it out.
So, Neil, are there any questions I didn't ask you that I should have?
Yeah, I think I'd like, if I can, just talk about the musicians that played on the album a little bit, because I think that was really important. This was an album that was recorded, and the engineer. It was recorded in Shenzhen, China, and it was a complete rush job because, like I said, I was way over the extension to apply to UPenn. So when they gave me the offer, I didn't have much time to pack up my life and move to Philly. And I had wanted to record these songs. Most of these songs came from my final Berklee project that I worked on. And because the final for guitar instruction, you get to do a final performance, or you get to do 2 half-hour performances. It doesn't have to be your music, but I chose for it to be my music. So I did a live performance with a bunch of musicians. And the only one from the live performance that came onto the album was the drummer, which I'm not going to talk about that other half. It became one of those things where there were creative differences, right? So the drummer came on board, and his name is Mark Buchoy from the Philippines. He's been playing all his life. Incredible drummer, plays all different styles. He's been well known in the Shenzhen music industry. He's lived there for 20 years. And wow, just like the beats that he put on that album and the way he shaped the songs was absolutely instrumental to that album. The bass player is also from the Philippines, and his name is he goes by Phil Hartzell, but I think Hartzell's his first name. The best bass player I've ever played with, bar none, and he's the one that convinced me to actually record the album and get all the guys for this project. Mark was already in, the drummer. Like, you know, I just had to say, hey, I'm recording. He's like, cool, I'm in, right? But then we had an issue because I'm like, I didn't necessarily want to use the vocalist that I had originally used, and I wanted to have keys, and I wanted to have saxophone, which was not in the performance. And I knew the guys that I wanted to use, and I thought there is no way ever that these guys would drop their schedule to come and record this album, which I paid for all of the recording time, and I paid for the mastering and the mixing and everything, but I didn't pay them. And that was part of the upfront agreement. Like, you guys come in and do your thing, but I'm not going to pay. It was a lot of money just to record what you hear, right? And so a guy from Colombia on saxophone, absolutely Mantono, phenomenal. I didn't give these guys anything. Like, I gave them the music, but I didn't say play this, play that, play this. So everything they played was what they wanted to play. And Ariel on keys is by far the most phenomenal musician on the album. And then the singer, Jonathan Amata, also from the Philippines. So it's like a mix of different people from all over the world, but South America, Philippines, and then me from Canada, the white boy, you know, who wrote everything. So yeah, I just want to give credit to those guys, because I know for a fact without their input, the album wouldn't sound nearly as good as it does.
Yes, I totally understand where you're coming from. I think when I look back at my own career, it's, you know, those partnerships that you create that bring out the best. And also just, you know, finding a way to work with people who are outstanding at what they do. It just takes you to an entirely different level. And then sometimes, like, I work with a guy named Andrew Stromstad, who is the best musician I know. He's a genius musician. And when I'm in the room with him, I just have to pinch myself. Like, yeah, this is my life. I get to make music with this guy. You know what I mean? And
it's funny you say that, because like we did one rehearsal before we went into the studio, and we started playing Salem Road, and which is the first, there's a reason, and it's the first song on the album. But I stopped playing because I just watching these guys do their thing, and I was blown away, and I'm like, wow, like I have video of it, and you just see me laughing for 2 hours, because I'm just so giddy at, like, that's what that's gonna sound like, right? Like, and it's amazing, you know. I'm like, wow, yeah.
Neil, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's always such a pleasure to see you. I've been following you on social media. Couldn't be happier for your success, man. It's so well deserved. Congratulations, man.
Vice versa, man. Vice versa, Brian. I'm so happy for you too, and I always enjoy talking to you. You really ask poignant questions, and you also have a lot to say, and that's, you know, because of your own success. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to stick around, but everybody else, thank you for joining in. And remember, every guitar master is once a beginner. The more you practice, the better you'll become. Rock.